The grand hall blazed with 1,000 candles, their golden light dancing across marble floors polished to mirror perfection. Tonight, the ancient ceremony of choosing would bind wolves to their destined mates, and the air itself seemed to pulse with anticipation, thick with jasmine incense and the mingled scents of hundreds of gathered pack members. Aurora Everthorne stood at the edge of the crowd, her white hair cascading like moonlight over the crimson silk of her dress, a stark contrast that drew eyes and whispers. She pressed one pale hand against her stomach, where a secret lay coiled tight as a spring, a truth she herself did not yet comprehend. The ceremony began with the howl of the Alpha King's second, a sound that reverberated through bone and blood. One by one, wolves stepped forward to claim their fated ones, the air shimmering with the ancient magic that bound soul to soul. Aurora watched, her vision beginning to blur at the edges, a strange heat building beneath her skin. She had not eaten all day. Nerves, she told herself. Only nerves. But deep within her womb, invisible and unknown, cells divided and multiplied, carrying the bloodline of the most powerful wolf in all the kingdoms. 3 weeks prior, there had been a night Aurora could not forget, though she had tried. A night when the full moon hung low and heavy, when she had wandered too far into the eastern woods and encountered him. Benedict Stormhowl, the Alpha King himself, moving through the shadows like a predator born of darkness and starlight. His black hair had fallen across his shoulders, his beard framing a face carved from granite and storm clouds. Their eyes had met, and something ancient and undeniable had sparked between them. She should have run. Instead, she had stayed. He had approached her with the lethal grace of a wolf who had never known defeat, his massive frame blocking out the moon itself. Yet when he reached for her, his touch had been impossibly gentle, fingers tracing the line of her jaw as though she were made of spun glass. "What is your name, little Omega?" His voice had been gravel and honey, a sound that made her knees weak. "Aurora," she had whispered, and her name on her own lips had sounded like a confession. "Aurora," he had repeated, tasting each syllable. "Dawn. How fitting, for you glow like the first light of morning." She should have been afraid. He was the Alpha King, brutal in battle, merciless to his enemies, a wolf whose reputation preceded him like the shadow of an eclipse. Stories were told of his ferocity, of challengers left broken, of kingdoms that bent the knee or burned. But in that moment, in that clearing where moonlight silvered the grass, he had looked at her as though she were the only thing in all the world that mattered. "I should go," Aurora had said, but her feet remained rooted. "Should you?" Benedict had stepped closer, and she could feel the heat radiating from his skin, could smell cedar and smoke and something wild that made her wolf stir restlessly. "Or should you stay, and let me learn what color your eyes turn when I make you sigh my name?" Heat had flooded her cheeks, her throat. She was an Omega, trained to be demure, to keep her gaze down, to know her place in the hierarchy that governed their world. But something in his presence stripped away all those careful lessons, leaving only the raw truth of desire. Before we continue with the story, tell us where you're watching from and how old you are. I hope you enjoy the story. "I do not even know you," she had managed. "Then let me remedy that." His hand had moved to the small of her back, drawing her closer until their bodies nearly touched. "I am Benedict Stormhowl, and I am yours for tonight, if you will have me." It had been madness. It had been inevitable. When his lips claimed hers, the world had fallen away, leaving only the press of his mouth, the strength of his arms, the way he growled her name like a prayer and a curse combined. He had laid her down on soft moss beneath ancient oaks, and there, under the watching moon, he had worshipped her with a reverence that contradicted everything she had heard about the fierce Alpha King. His hands had mapped every curve, every hollow. His mouth had followed, pressing kisses to her throat, her collarbone, the soft swell of her breasts. He had been patient, drawing out her pleasure until she trembled and begged, until her nails scored his shoulders and she cried out his name to the indifferent stars. And when they finally joined, when he filled her completely, his eyes had locked with hers, storm gray, meeting frost blue, and Aurora had felt something shift deep in her soul. A recognition, a claiming that went beyond the physical, beyond even the supernatural bonds that governed their kind. Mine, he had growled against her neck as he moved within her, and she had arched beneath him, gasping. Yours, she had agreed, lost to sensation, to the overwhelming rightness of their joining. They had come together beneath that full moon, their cries mingling with the night wind, and in that perfect moment, life had sparked into being, though neither of them knew. Afterward, he had held her cradled against his chest, his fingers combing through her white hair with a tenderness that made her heart ache. "What happens now?" Aurora had whispered. Benedict had been quiet for a long moment, his jaw tightening. "Now you return to your pack, and I return to my throne." The words had struck like a blow. That's all this was. One night? That is all it can be. His arms had tightened around her, contradicting his words. I am the Alpha King. I have responsibilities, expectations. There are alliances to maintain, politics to navigate, and Omega cannot stand beside me as queen. The rejection had burned, but Aurora had lifted her chin, pride coming to her rescue. I understand. I am not foolish enough to have expected more. Aurora. Thank you for the evening, Your Majesty. She had pulled away, gathering her torn clothing, her dignity in tatters but her spine straight. I will remember it fondly. She had fled then, before he could see the tears, before her treacherous heart could hope for words he would not speak. Benedict had let her go, though every instinct screamed at him to chase, to claim, to keep. He had remained there in that clearing until dawn truly broke, his fists clenched, his wolf howling inside his mind. She had felt like destiny, like the answer to a question he had been asking his entire life. But he was the Alpha King, and his duty was clear. His advisors had already arranged political matches, wolves of appropriate breeding and status who would strengthen his reign. An Omega with white hair and eyes like winter morning did not fit into those carefully laid plans, no matter how perfectly she had fit into his arms. Now, 3 weeks later, Aurora stood in the grand hall, unaware that her body had already begun the miraculous work of creating new life. She felt ill, feverish, her stomach churning as another pair of mates stepped forward to be blessed. The crowd's voices seemed to come from very far away, muffled and strange. And then she saw him. Benedict Stormhowl stood at the dais, tall and imposing in black ceremonial robes that made him look like a king from ancient legends. His long black hair had been pulled back, his beard neatly trimmed, emphasizing the sharp angles of his face. He stood with his hands clasped behind his back, his expression carved from stone as he observed the proceedings. Their eyes met across the distance, and Aurora's heart stopped. For one wild moment, something flickered in his storm-gray gaze. Recognition, hunger, regret. But then his expression shuddered, becoming cold and remote, the face of a king who acknowledged no weaknesses. Aurora's vision swam. The heat beneath her skin had become unbearable, sweat beading at her temples despite the cool evening air. Her hands trembled as she gripped her skirts, trying to remain upright as the world tilted dangerously. The ceremony continued, oblivious to her distress. 2 more pairs joined, then 3. The sacred words were spoken, the bonds formed and blessed. Aurora tried to focus, tried to breathe through the nausea that rose in waves. She did not know about the tiny heartbeat that had begun in her womb just days ago. Did not know that her body was changing, adapting, creating space for the Alpha King's heir. The pregnancy hormones flooded her system, combining with her anxiety, her hunger, her heartbreak, into a perfect storm. "Are there any others who wish to step forward?" the elder intoned, his voice carrying across the hall. The room held its collective breath, waiting. Aurora took one step toward the door, intending to slip away unnoticed. Her vision blurred further. The candles seemed to multiply, their flames dancing in dizzying patterns. The floor beneath her feet felt suddenly insubstantial, as though she stood on water rather than marble. And then, darkness rose up to claim her. She heard her own gasp, felt her knees buckle, and then she was falling. Falling. The red silk of her dress billowing around her like blood against the pale marble. The sound of her body hitting the floor echoed like a thunderclap in the sudden silence. For a moment, no one moved. The entire assembly froze, shocked by the unexpected disruption. An Omega fainting during the ceremony of choosing was unprecedented, a bad omen that would be discussed and dissected for weeks to come. But Benedict moved. In the space of a heartbeat, the Alpha King was off the dais, his ceremonial composure shattered. He moved with inhuman speed, crossing the hall in great strides that scattered the crowd like leaves before a storm. Wolves stumbled over themselves to get out of his way, their eyes wide with shock at their king's unprecedented breach of protocol. He dropped to his knees beside Aurora's crumpled form, his large hands surprisingly gentle as he gathered her into his arms. Her white hair spilled across his forearm like silk, her face pale as death against the crimson of her dress. "Aurora," he said, his voice rough with an emotion he could not name. "Aurora, open your eyes." She remained limp, unconscious, her head lolling against his shoulder. Benedict pressed his fingers to the pulse point at her throat, relief flooding through him when he felt the steady beat of her heart. Alive. She was alive. Around them, the crowd erupted into whispers, but Benedict heard none of it. His entire world had narrowed to the woman in his arms, to the terrifying vulnerability of her unconscious form. His wolf raged inside him, demanding he protect, defend, keep safe. "Someone fetch the healer," he commanded, his voice cracking like a whip. Several wolves jumped to obey, running from the hall. Benedict adjusted his hold, cradling Aurora closer against his chest. This close, he could smell her scent, that unique combination of winter frost and wild roses that had haunted his dreams for 3 weeks. But there was something else now, something new woven into her scent that he could not quite identify, something that made his wolf still and tilt its head in confusion. "Your Majesty," one of his advisors ventured, approaching cautiously. "Perhaps it would be more appropriate if—" "Be silent," Benedict growled, and the advisor stumbled back, bowing hastily. The Alpha King's eyes had begun to glow with his wolf's power, a clear warning that he would tolerate no interference. He stood, lifting Aurora's slight weight effortlessly, holding her as though she were made of precious glass. The crowd parted before him like the sea, everyone pressing back to give him space. Their king had never shown such concern for anyone, had never allowed his iron control to slip in such a public manner. The whispers grew louder, speculation running wild. Who was this white-haired Omega? Why did the Alpha King cradle her with such obvious care? What did it mean? Benedict carried Aurora from the grand hall, his long strides eating up the distance. His mind raced with possibilities, each more terrifying than the last. What had caused her collapse? Was she ill? Injured? Had someone dared to harm her? The very thought made his vision tint red, made his wolf snarl with the need to rend and tear. If anyone had touched her, had caused her pain, he would paint the walls with their blood. He brought her to his own chambers, kicking the door open with enough force to crack the frame. The guards stationed outside wisely remained silent, though their eyes went wide with shock. No woman had ever been brought to the Alpha King's personal rooms, a fact that would fuel gossip for months. Benedict laid Aurora on his massive bed, her white hair spreading across his pillows like moonlight on water. The red dress stood out starkly against his dark furs and silks, a splash of color in his monochrome domain. He knelt beside the bed, one hand cupping her cheek, his thumb stroking the soft skin beneath her eye. "Come back to me," he murmured, and was startled by the pleading note in his own voice. Kings did not plead, kings commanded. But in this moment, he was just a man desperate for the woman he had tried so hard to forget to open her eyes. The healer arrived minutes later, an elderly she-wolf named Meredith who had served the royal family for 50 years. She took in the scene with wise, knowing eyes, noting the way the Alpha King hovered over the unconscious Omega, the protective curve of his body, the raw concern etched into every line of his face. "Let me examine her, Your Majesty," Meredith said gently, setting down her bag of herbs and instruments. Benedict did not move. Could not move. The thought of stepping away from Aurora, of leaving her even for a moment, was physically painful. "Benedict," Meredith said, using his name rather than his title, a liberty only she could claim. "I cannot help her if you do not give me space." With visible effort, Benedict forced himself to step back. He moved to the window, gripping the stone sill hard enough to crack, his muscles rigid with tension as he watched Meredith work. The healer checked Aurora's pulse, examined her eyes, pressed skilled fingers to various points on her body. She lifted Aurora's wrist, studying it carefully, then placed a hand flat against the Omega's stomach. For a long moment, Meredith was perfectly still, her eyes closed in concentration. Then they flew open, wide with shock. "Your Majesty," she said slowly, carefully. "When did you last see this woman?" 3 weeks ago." The words came out as a growl. "Why? What is wrong with her?" Meredith's expression was unreadable as she straightened, her hand still resting on Aurora's stomach. "There is nothing wrong with her. She is pregnant." The word hung in the air like a blade suspended above Benedict's head. For several heartbeats, he could not process it, could not make sense of what he had heard. Pregnant. Aurora was pregnant. How far along? His voice sounded strange, even to his own ears, distant and hollow. "Based on her scent and the strength of the life force I sense, I would estimate approximately 3 weeks." Meredith's sharp eyes fixed on him. "Which would coincide exactly with the last time you saw her." 3 weeks, the night of the full moon, the night he had claimed her beneath ancient oaks, had filled her with his seed, had marked her in ways that went beyond the physical. The child was his. The knowledge settled over him with the weight of destiny, of fate finally showing its hand. Aurora carried his heir, the future of the Stormhowl bloodline, and she had come to the ceremony of choosing not knowing, had fainted in front of the entire assembly, while his child grew in secret within her womb. "Does anyone else know?" Benedict asked, his mind already racing ahead, calculating threats and complications. "Not yet, but they will suspect soon enough." Meredith began packing up her supplies. An Omega fainting at such a ceremony will be discussed, investigated, and when her pregnancy becomes visible, questions will be asked. "Then we have time." Benedict turned back to Aurora, studying her peaceful face, the slight curve of her lips, the way her hand rested naturally over her still flat stomach, as if some part of her already knew what she carried. "Time to decide what must be done." "And what will you decide, Your Majesty?" Meredith asked quietly. "You have political alliances to consider, expectations to meet. An Omega bearing your child, your heir, complicates matters considerably." "I am aware of my responsibilities," Benedict said coldly, though his eyes never left Aurora's face. "You may go. Tell no one of this." Meredith bowed and departed, leaving the Alpha King alone with the unconscious Omega who carried his greatest secret. Benedict returned to the bedside, sinking down to sit on the edge of the mattress. He reached out, hesitating for just a moment before placing his large hand over Aurora's stomach. Nothing felt different yet. She was still so slight, so delicate. But life grew there, his child, the product of their single night of passion. "What have we done?" he whispered to the silent room, to the woman who could not hear him. "What have I done to you?" As if in answer, Aurora stirred. A soft moan escaped her lips, and her eyelids fluttered. Benedict's hand moved from her stomach to her face, cupping her cheek with infinite gentleness. "Aurora, can you hear me?" Her eyes opened slowly, frost blue and confused, focusing with difficulty on his face. For a moment she simply stared, as if unsure whether she was dreaming. Then memory returned, and her expression shifted from confusion to hurt, to carefully constructed indifference. "Your Majesty," she said, her voice hoarse. She tried to sit up, and Benedict helped her, supporting her back with one arm. "I apologize for disrupting the ceremony. I do not know what came over me." "You fainted." His tone was neutral, giving nothing away, though his heart hammered in his chest. She did not know. She had no idea that she carried his child, that everything had changed in the space of a heartbeat. Aurora's hand went to her forehead, rubbing at her temples. "I have not been feeling well lately. I should have stayed home. Have you been eating?" The question seemed to surprise her. Not as much as I should, perhaps. Food has not been appealing." Pregnancy symptoms, Benedict realized. Morning sickness, fatigue, all the signs had been there, and she had attributed them to stress, to heartbreak, to anything but the truth. He needed to tell her. The knowledge burned on his tongue, demanding release. But what would he say? How did one inform a woman that she carried the heir to the throne, that her entire life was about to irrevocably change? "Aurora," he began, then stopped, unsure how to continue. She looked at him then, really looked at him, and something in her expression made his chest tighten. There was no hope in her eyes, no expectation. She had armored herself against him, built walls to protect her heart. "I should go," she said quietly, moving to slide off the bed. "Thank you for your concern, Your Majesty, but I am certain I have already caused enough scandal for one evening." "You are not going anywhere." The command came out harsher than he intended, and Aurora froze, her eyes going wide. "Excuse me?" Benedict stood, pacing away from the bed, his hands clenching and unclenching. He needed to think, needed to plan. There were protocols to follow, announcements to be made. His advisors would be furious. The political ramifications would be extensive. But none of that mattered, not really, because the undeniable truth was this. Aurora carried his child, and he would be damned before he let her face the consequences alone. "You will remain here, in the palace, under my protection," he said, his tone brooking no argument. Aurora's expression shifted to outrage. "I most certainly will not. You made your position quite clear 3 weeks ago, Your Majesty. I have no intention of becoming your kept woman, your convenient—" "You are pregnant." The words fell between them like stones into still water, sending ripples that would eventually become waves. Aurora's mouth opened, then closed. She shook her head slowly, as if denying the possibility. "No, that is impossible. I would know if I were—" "The healer examined you while you were unconscious. 3 weeks along, she estimates." Benedict turned to face her, his expression fierce. "My child grows in your womb, Aurora. My heir." The color drained from her face. She pressed both hands to her stomach, her eyes going distant as if listening to something only she could hear. "No," she whispered. "No. This cannot be happening." "It is happening." Benedict crossed to her, kneeling before her so their eyes were level. And now everything changes. Changes how? Aurora's voice rose with panic. You said it yourself, and Omega cannot stand beside you. What am I supposed to do? Hide away in shame while you marry some appropriate she-wolf and pretend this child does not exist? No. The single word was absolute, final. You will marry me. Silence. Aurora stared at him as if he had spoken in a foreign tongue, her chest rising and falling rapidly as she struggled to process his declaration. Marry you, she repeated faintly. You cannot be serious. I am entirely serious. Benedict reached up, taking her hands in his thumbs stroking over her knuckles. You carry my heir. That makes you the most important person in this kingdom. I will not have my child born without my name, without my protection. But the politics, the alliances, all the things you said, are no longer relevant. His eyes burned into hers, storm gray, intense, and unyielding. I made a mistake 3 weeks ago. I let you walk away because I was a coward, because I allowed duty and expectation to override what I knew in my bones to be true. And what is that? Aurora's voice trembled. Benedict raised one hand to cup her face, his touch infinitely gentle. That you are mine. That you have always been mine. From the moment our eyes met in that clearing. I have spent 3 weeks trying to convince myself otherwise, trying to forget the way you felt in my arms, the sounds you made when I touched you. But I cannot forget, Aurora, and I will not let you go again. Tears welled in her eyes, spilling over to track down her pale cheeks. You hurt me, she whispered. You let me believe I meant nothing. I know. His thumb caught her tears, wiping them away. And I will spend the rest of my life making amends for that cruelty. But I am asking you now, Aurora Everthorn, to be my mate, my queen, the mother of my children. Plural, he added with the ghost of a smile. Because if you think I will be satisfied with just one after tasting the perfection of you, you are very much mistaken. A laugh burst from her, half sob, half genuine amusement. You are impossible. I am the Alpha King. Impossible is rather expected of me. His expression grew serious again. But I am also just a man who found the other half of his soul and was fool enough to let her go. Do not make me live with that mistake, Aurora. Say you will have me. She searched his face, looking for deception, for doubt. She found only raw honesty, fierce determination, and something that looked very much like love, though neither of them had spoken the word yet. If I agree, she said slowly, I need to know that this is not just about the baby. I need to know that you want me, not just an heir. Benedict leaned forward, pressing his forehead to hers, his breath mingling with hers. I want you, he said, his voice rough with emotion. I have wanted you since the moment I saw you. The baby is a gift, a blessing I never expected. But you, Aurora, you are the miracle. You are the one who made me feel alive again after years of simply existing. You are the one I see when I close my eyes, the one whose name I speak in my sleep. The baby is important, yes, but you are essential. Aurora closed her eyes, feeling the truth of his words resonate through her entire being. Her wolf, silent until now, stirred and stretched, recognizing its mate, purring with satisfaction at finally being claimed. Yes, she whispered. Yes, I will marry you. Benedict pulled back just enough to look at her, and the smile that spread across his face transformed him from a fierce king into something younger, lighter, almost boyish in his joy. He cupped her face in both hands and kissed her, pouring 3 weeks of longing and regret and hope into the press of his lips against hers. Aurora melted into him, her hands coming up to fist in his long black hair, holding him close as if afraid he might disappear. The kiss deepened, tongues meeting, tasting, remembering. Heat bloomed between them, that same undeniable chemistry that had brought them together beneath the full moon. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Benedict rested his forehead against hers once more. "I will announce our engagement tomorrow," he said. "There will be opposition, questions, challenges. Are you prepared for that?" Aurora straightened her spine, lifting her chin in that proud gesture he was coming to adore. "I am prepared for whatever comes, as long as you stand beside me." "Always," he promised. "From this moment forward, you do not face anything alone." He kissed her again, softer this time, reverent. Then he stood, drawing her up with him, keeping her hand clasped in his. "You need to eat," he said, his tone shifting to something commanding, but laced with affection. "And rest. The pregnancy will be demanding on your body." "I feel fine now," Aurora protested. But even as she spoke, her stomach growled audibly. Benedict raised one eyebrow. "Your body disagrees. Come." He led her to the sitting area of his chambers, settling her onto a plush sofa before the fireplace. He pulled a cord to summon servants, then returned to sit beside her, drawing her against his side with casual possessiveness. When the servants arrived, their eyes went wide at the sight of the white-haired Omega tucked against their king's side, but they were well trained enough to show no other reaction. "Bring food," Benedict commanded. "A variety, and milk, tea, water. Whatever the kitchens have that is fresh and nourishing." The servants bowed and departed, and Aurora tilted her head to look up at him. "You are being very commanding." "I am always commanding. I am the Alpha King." "No." She poked him in the ribs, making him grunt in surprise. "You are being commanding about me, about taking care of me." His expression softened, and he pressed a kiss to the top of her head, breathing in the scent of her hair. "Get used to it. You are mine now, and I take care of what is mine. I am not a possession." "No," he agreed. "You are far more precious than any possession. You are my mate, my future queen, the mother of my child, and I will move heaven and earth to ensure your happiness and safety." Aurora nestled closer, feeling the steady beat of his heart beneath her cheek. It still felt surreal, this sudden reversal of fortune. Hours ago, she had been a nobody, an Omega with no prospects, nursing a broken heart. Now she was betrothed to the Alpha King, carrying his heir, about to become the most powerful she-wolf in the kingdom. "Are you frightened?" Benedict asked quietly, as if reading her thoughts. "Terrified," she admitted. "I do not know how to be a queen." "Good thing you will have a lifetime to learn." His hand found hers, their fingers interlacing. "And I will be with you every step of the way." The servants returned bearing trays laden with food, roasted meats, fresh bread, cheeses, fruits, and pastries. They set everything on the low table before the sofa, bowed again, and departed. Benedict began loading a plate, selecting small portions of everything, then handed it to Aurora. "Eat." She took the plate, suddenly ravenous. The first bite of bread seemed to awaken her hunger, and she ate with enthusiasm, not caring that she probably looked unladylike. Benedict watched with satisfaction, occasionally reaching over to add more to her plate when it threatened to empty. "You will need to eat frequently now," he said. "Small meals throughout the day. The healer will provide more specific guidance, but for now, do not deny yourself anything you crave." Aurora paused mid-bite, looking at him with something like wonder. "How do you know so much about pregnancy?" A shadow crossed his face. "My mother was with child 5 times after my birth. 4 did not survive past the first few months. The one that did, my sister, lived only 3 years before illness took her." He was quiet for a moment, old pain flickering in his eyes. "I swore then that if I ever had a child of my own, I would do everything in my power to protect both mother and babe. So I learned. I read every text, consulted every healer. I made it my business to understand. Aurora set down her plate and turned to him, cupping his bearded face in both hands. I am sorry for your losses, but Benedict, you cannot prevent every danger. I am strong. Our baby will be strong. You fainted tonight, he said grimly. You nearly cracked your skull on marble. Because I was foolish and had not eaten. That will not happen again. She stroked her thumbs along his cheekbones. You cannot wrap me in silk and keep me locked away. I need you to trust that I can do this. Benedict caught her hands, pressing kisses to her palms. I trust you. It is the world I do not trust. There are enemies, Aurora. Wolves who would see my line ended, who would view you and our child as targets. The moment we announce this, you will be in danger. Then we face that danger together. Her voice was firm, steady. I will not live my life in fear, and I will not let our child be raised by a father who sees threats in every shadow. He studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. You are braver than I am. No, I simply have faith that we are meant to be, that our child is meant to be. Some things are written in the stars, Benedict. We cannot fight fate. Watch me try, he muttered. But there was affection in his tone. He pulled her back against him, tucking her head beneath his chin. Finish eating, then you will sleep. Here? Here, in my bed, where you belong. Aurora felt heat rise in her cheeks, but she did not protest. The truth was, she did not want to leave, did not want to return to her small, lonely room when she could stay here, wrapped in the Alpha King's protective presence. She finished her meal slowly, savoring each bite, feeling Benedict's fingers stroke through her hair in a soothing rhythm. When she finally set the empty plate aside, he stood and swept her up into his arms without warning. I can walk, she protested, but her arms went around his neck automatically. I know, but I want to carry you. He moved to the bed, laying her down gently before following her down, stretching out beside her. He pulled the furs up over both of them, then drew her into his arms, her back to his chest, his body curved protectively around hers. His hand settled over her stomach, splaying wide, possessive and protective at once. Sleep, he murmured against her hair. I will keep watch. Aurora wanted to argue that he needed sleep too, but exhaustion was already pulling at her, the events of the evening finally catching up. She had fainted, learned she was pregnant, gotten engaged to the Alpha King, all in the span of a few hours. Her mind spun with the implications, with all the changes to come. But here, in Benedict's arms, with his steady breathing and strong heartbeat lulling her, she felt safe. She felt cherished. Benedict? She whispered, already half asleep. Thank you for catching me when I fell. His arms tightened around her. Always, my Dawn. I will always catch you. She drifted off with a smile on her lips, cradled against the chest of the most dangerous wolf in the kingdom, who held her as if she were made of starlight and promises. Benedict remained awake long into the night, his hand never moving from her stomach, his mind already planning, strategizing. There would be battles ahead, he knew. Political maneuvering, threats both open and hidden. But let them come. Let anyone who dared try to take this woman, this child from him, step forward. They would learn what it meant to face the Alpha King when he had something worth protecting, something worth killing for, something worth living for. The next morning dawned crisp and clear, winter sunlight streaming through the high windows of the royal chambers. Aurora woke slowly, disoriented for a moment by the unfamiliar surroundings. Then memory returned, and with it, the weight of Benedict's arm across her waist, the solid warmth of him pressed against her back. She turned carefully, not wanting to wake him, and found herself face to face with the Alpha King in sleep. He looked younger like this, his features relaxed, his long black hair spread across the pillow. Without his usual guarded expression, she could see traces of the boy he must have been, before duty and tragedy had hardened him into the formidable leader he had become. Unable to resist, Aurora reached up and traced the line of his jaw, her fingers exploring the texture of his beard, the curve of his lips. His eyes opened immediately, alert despite just waking, and she froze like a child caught stealing sweets. "Good morning," he rumbled, his voice deeper with sleep, and the sound of it did delicious things to her insides. "I did not mean to wake you." "I am glad you did." He caught her hand, pressing a kiss to her wrist, right over her pulse point. "How do you feel?" Aurora took inventory. Her stomach was calm, settled. She felt rested, energized even. "Better. Much better." "Good." Benedict sat up, pulling her with him, his hands spanning her waist. Even through the silk of her dress, she could feel the heat of his palms. "We have much to do today. First, you will bathe and dress properly. I will have my seamstress attend you, take your measurements. You will need an entire new wardrobe befitting a queen." "I have clothes." "Not nearly enough." His tone was final. "And nothing appropriate for your new station. As my betrothed, you represent the crown. You will be dressed accordingly." Aurora bit her lip, feeling overwhelmed. This is all happening so fast. Benedict's expression softened. He cupped her face, tilting it up so she had to meet his eyes. "I know, but we have no time to waste. Every moment we delay gives our enemies time to plot, to scheme. We announce today, and we marry within the week." "A week?" Aurora's eyes went wide. "But preparations for a royal wedding take months." "Then we will be married twice. A private ceremony immediately, binding us legally and in the eyes of our wolves. A grand public ceremony later, once the child is born, and you have had time to recover." His thumb stroked her cheek. "What matters is making you mine in every way that counts, as quickly as possible." There was something possessive in his tone that made her shiver, but not with fear, with anticipation. "Very well," she agreed. "We do this your way." "Our way," he corrected. "From now on, every decision we make together." He sealed the promise with a kiss, and Aurora lost herself in the taste of him, the feel of his hands tightening on her waist. When he pulled back, they were both breathing hard, and his eyes had begun to glow with his wolf's power. "Soon," he promised, his voice rough. "Soon I will have you properly in this bed, as my mate and wife. But first, we have a kingdom to shock." He rose from the bed, magnificent and intimidating, even in his rumpled clothing from the previous evening, and pulled the bell cord to summon servants. They arrived within moments, eyes carefully averted from the compromising scene of their king and the white-haired Omega clearly having spent the night together. "Prepare a bath for my betrothed," Benedict commanded, "and summon Helene the seamstress, Clara the hairdresser, and Marin the jeweler. They are to attend Lady Aurora immediately." "Lady Aurora?" one of the servants squeaked, then clapped a hand over her mouth. "Yes," Benedict said coolly. "Lady Aurora Everthorne, my future mate and queen. Spread the word, and if I hear any disrespect toward her from anyone, I will personally ensure they regret it." The servants bowed hastily and scattered to obey. Benedict turned back to Aurora, who sat on the bed looking slightly shell-shocked. "You just announced our engagement to the servants," she said faintly. "Indeed. By noon the entire palace will know. By evening the news will have reached every corner of the kingdom." He prowled back to the bed, leaning over her, caging her in with his arms. "Let them talk. Let them whisper and speculate. You are mine now, and I want everyone to know it." His possessiveness should have rankled, should have made her want to assert her independence. Instead, it made her feel cherished, protected, claimed in the best possible way. "You are very sure of yourself," she murmured, reaching up to toy with his long hair. "I am sure of us." He nipped at her lower lip, making her gasp. "Now go. Bathe. Make yourself beautiful, though you hardly need any enhancement. I have a council to face, and they will not be pleased with my news." Aurora sobered, remembering the political complications he had mentioned. "Will they try to stop you?" "They can try." His smile was sharp, dangerous. "It will not end well for them." He helped her from the bed, steadying her when she swayed slightly. The servants had returned, hovering nervously by the door, and Benedict handed Aurora over to their care with obvious reluctance. "Take care of her," he ordered. "And remember, she is to be your queen. Treat her with the respect and deference that position demands." The servants bowed deeply. "Yes, Your Majesty." Benedict watched as they led Aurora toward the bathing chamber, his expression unreadable. Only when she had disappeared from sight did he finally turn away, his jaw set with grim determination. He had a council to face, and a kingdom to bend to his will. The council chamber was already full when Benedict arrived, his advisors and the heads of the major packs gathered around the long table. They fell silent as he entered, rising to bow, but their expressions ranged from concerned to openly hostile. Benedict took his seat at the head of the table, the throne-like chair emphasizing his position above all others. He waited until everyone had settled before speaking, his voice carrying easily across the room. "I called this meeting to make an announcement," he began, his tone deceptively mild. "Last night's ceremony was interrupted by an unexpected event, as you all know. What you do not know is that the Omega who fainted, Aurora Everthorn, is my intended mate." Chaos erupted. Every council member began speaking at once, voices rising in protest, shock, confusion. Benedict sat calmly through it, letting them vent their initial reactions, his face carved from stone. Finally, he raised one hand, and the room fell silent immediately, testament to his absolute authority. "If you are quite finished," he said dryly. "I was not asking for your permission. I was informing you of my decision." "Your Majesty," one of the older advisors, Lord Corvin, leaned forward. "With all due respect, this is highly irregular. You have alliances to consider, contracts that have been negotiated. Lady Seraphine of the Northern Pax was expecting—" "Lady Seraphine can expect disappointment." Benedict's voice could have cut glass. "I have chosen my mate, and she is Aurora Everthorn. This is not a subject for debate." "But she is an Omega," another council member sputtered. "Your Majesty, an Omega cannot provide the strength needed to—" "Can she not?" Benedict's eyes flashed dangerously. "My mate carries my heir even as we speak. I would say that demonstrates considerable strength." The announcement hit like a physical blow. Silence descended, absolute and stunned. Then the whispers started, cascading around the table like wildfire. Pregnant. The Omega was pregnant with the Alpha King's child. Heir. Bloodline. Succession. "This changes everything," Lord Corvin said slowly, his expression calculating. "If she truly carries your heir, she does. The healer confirmed it last night." Benedict's hand clenched on the armrest of his chair, but his voice remained level. "Which is why I am announcing not only our engagement but our immediate marriage. The ceremony will take place in 3 days." More protests rose, but Benedict silenced them with a look. "You may adjust," he said coldly. "You may accept. But you will not oppose me in this. Aurora Everthorn will be my mate, my queen, and the mother of my children. Anyone who has a problem with that arrangement is welcome to take it up with me personally." The threat in his tone was unmistakable. No one was foolish enough to accept that invitation. Lord Corvin cleared his throat. Your Majesty, we understand your attachment, but surely you can see the complications. The Northern Alliance will be furious. Lady Seraphine's father will view this as a grave insult. We could be facing war. Then let them bring war. Benedict's voice was flat, final. I will not sacrifice my mate for political expediency. If the Northern Alliance wishes to challenge me, they are welcome to try. We all know how that will end. It was not an idle boast. Benedict Stormhowl had never lost a battle, never been defeated in single combat. His reputation alone had kept most challenges at bay for years. There are other considerations, a she-wolf named Morgana spoke up. The Omega, Aurora, she is untested, unknown. How do we know she can handle the pressures of being queen? The scrutiny, the enemies, the constant political maneuvering. She will learn, Benedict said, just as every queen before her learned, and she will have my full support and protection while she does. That is what concerns us, Morgana pressed. Your Majesty, you are different with her. We saw it last night. The way you ran to her side. The way you carried her from the hall as if nothing else mattered. A king cannot be distracted by personal feelings. A king must always put the kingdom first. Benedict leaned forward, his elbows on the table, his eyes boring into Morgana. Let me be very clear about something. Aurora is not a distraction from my duty. She is part of my duty now. She carries my heir, the future of this kingdom. Protecting her, ensuring her safety and happiness, is protecting the future of us all. If you cannot understand that, then perhaps you are not fit to serve on this council. Morgana paled and sat back, chastened. Lord Corvin tried again, his tone more placating. Your Majesty, we are not trying to oppose you. We are trying to help you see all the angles. If you marry this Omega, there will be consequences. Some packs will see it as weakness, a great king brought low by a pretty face. Others will view her as an easy target, a way to hurt you through her. Are you prepared to deal with all of that? I am prepared to burn anyone who threatens her to ash, Benedict said pleasantly, and the casual way he delivered the threat made it all the more chilling. I am prepared to remind every wolf in this kingdom exactly why I am the Alpha King, and why challenging me is the last mistake they will ever make. If that is what it takes to keep my mate and child safe, then so be it. He stood, signaling the meeting was over. Prepare for a royal wedding. Send word to the packs that attendance is required. Anyone who does not show will be noted, and their loyalty questioned. Are we understood? Murmurs of assent rippled around the table, though many faces still looked troubled. Your Majesty, Lord Corvin said as Benedict turned to leave. Do you love her? Benedict paused, his hand on the door. It was a bold question, perhaps too bold, but Corvin had served his family for decades and had earned some latitude. Yes, Benedict said simply, and the admission felt like both a relief and a surrender. I love her, and that is precisely why I will let nothing and no one take her from me. He left the council chamber behind, the murmurs rising again in his wake, but he paid them no mind. They would adjust. They always did. His will was law, and his will was absolute. He returned to his chambers to find them transformed into a hive of activity. Seamstresses fluttered around Aurora like butterflies, holding up fabrics, taking measurements, consulting in hushed voices. Aurora herself stood on a raised platform, looking overwhelmed but trying to maintain composure, her white hair now styled in an intricate braid that made her look regal. When she saw Benedict enter, her face lit up, relief evident in her expression. He shouldered through the crowd of attendants, ignoring their startled protests, and took Aurora's hands in his. How are you holding up? He murmured. They have measured every inch of me, Aurora whispered back. I did not know one person needed so many clothes. Benedict's lips twitched. A queen has many duties, many appearances. Each requires appropriate attire. I am beginning to understand why queens in stories always look exhausted. He laughed, a genuine sound that made the seamstresses exchange shocked glances. The Alpha King did not laugh. He growled, commanded, occasionally smiled grimly. But laugh? Never. "Come," Benedict said, pulling Aurora down from the platform despite the seamstress's cry of protest. "You need a break. Your Majesty, we are not finished." "You are finished for now." Benedict's tone brooked no argument. "Return this afternoon." The servants bowed and began gathering their supplies, departing with backward glances at the couple. When they were finally alone, Benedict guided Aurora to the sofa, settling her against him with easy familiarity. "How did the council take the news?" Aurora asked, studying his face. "As expected. Protests, concerns, dire warnings." He shrugged. "I informed them their opinions were noted and irrelevant." "Benedict," Aurora said, her tone chiding. "These are your advisors. You should at least listen to their concerns." "I did listen. I simply did not agree." He tilted her face up, his expression serious. "I will not apologize for choosing you, Aurora. Not to them, not to anyone. I know, but we will need their support. We cannot rule effectively if your council opposes us at every turn. They will come around." His thumb stroked along her jaw. "And if they do not, I will replace them with those who will." Aurora sighed. "You cannot solve every problem by being autocratic. Watch me." She poked him in the ribs again, making him grunt. "You are impossible." "You have mentioned that before. I take it as a compliment." Despite herself, Aurora smiled. There was something comforting about his absolute confidence, even if it bordered on arrogance. In his arms, she felt protected, cherished. The outside world, with all its complications and dangers, seemed very far away. "Tell me about your family," Benedict said suddenly. "Your pack." Aurora's expression grew guarded. "There is not much to tell. My parents died when I was young. I was raised by the pack, but as an Omega, I was never important. I was given tasks, kept fed and clothed, but no one ever expected anything from me." "Fools," Benedict growled. "You are extraordinary. You are biased." "I am honest." His hand settled over her stomach. "This child will be raised knowing its worth, its strength. Omega or Alpha or anything in between, our children will be loved and valued." "Children?" Aurora raised an eyebrow. "You are already planning multiple?" "At least 3, Benedict said seriously. "Maybe 4. I want a large family, Aurora. I want halls filled with laughter and chaos, not the cold silence I grew up with." The vulnerability in his admission made Aurora's heart clench. She could see it so clearly. Benedict, a young boy growing up in these massive, empty chambers, learning to be strong and hard and unyielding, because softness meant weakness, and weakness meant death. "Then we will have a large family," she agreed softly. "We will fill these halls with love and laughter. Our children will never doubt that they are wanted." Benedict pulled her close, burying his face in her hair. "I do not deserve you," he murmured. "Probably not," Aurora teased. "But you are stuck with me now." "Gladly stuck." He pressed a kiss to her temple. "For the rest of my life, gladly stuck." They remained like that for a long time, simply holding each other, drawing strength and comfort from the connection that had formed between them. Outside, the palace was probably in an uproar, gossip spreading like wildfire. But in this moment, in this room, there was only the two of them, and the tiny spark of life growing between them. A knock at the door finally interrupted their peace. Benedict growled his annoyance, but called, "Enter." A messenger stepped in, bowing deeply. Your Majesty, a delegation from the Northern Alliance has arrived. They request an immediate audience. Benedict's expression hardened. Of course they do. He looked at Aurora. This is about Lady Seraphine. They will be angry. Should I be there? Aurora asked. No. The word was absolute. I will not have them intimidate you or make you feel unwelcome in your own home. You stay here. Rest. I will handle this. He stood, and Aurora watched as he transformed before her eyes. The gentle lover who had held her so carefully became the Alpha King, his shoulders squaring, his expression becoming a mask of cold authority. He was terrifying and magnificent, and Aurora understood in that moment why entire packs bent to his will. Benedict! She called as he reached the door. He turned back, and she saw him struggle to keep the coldness from his expression when looking at her. Come back safely. His expression softened fractionally. Always. The Northern Alliance delegation was everything Benedict had expected. Pompous, self-important, and visibly furious. Lord Torsten, Seraphine's father, led the group, his face mottled with rage barely held in check. Benedict received them in the throne room, seated on his high throne, looking down at them with cool indifference. He let them bow, let them stew in silence for several long moments before acknowledging them. Lord Torsten, to what do I owe the pleasure of this visit? Torsten's hands clenched at his sides. You know very well why we are here, Your Majesty. News has reached us of your engagement. Ah, yes. I am to be congratulated, I assume. The sarcasm was not lost on anyone present. Torsten's face reddened further. We had an agreement. My daughter was to be your mate, your queen. Alliance between our packs, strengthening of bloodlines. An agreement you and my late father discussed, Benedict interrupted. I made no such promise. Your father's word was law, and my father is dead. Benedict's voice went cold as winter frost. I am the Alpha King now, and my word is the only law that matters. I have chosen my mate. Your daughter is free to find happiness elsewhere. This is an insult, Torsten exploded. You led us to believe. I led you to believe nothing. Benedict leaned forward, his eyes beginning to glow. Any assumptions you made were your own, and any offense you choose to take is also your own. The Northern Alliance will not forget this slight, Torsten warned, his voice shaking with fury. We could have been your strongest allies. Now you have made us your enemies. Benedict rose from his throne, descending the steps slowly, each footfall echoing in the vast chamber. The Northern delegation instinctively stepped back, confronted by the sheer presence of the Alpha King at his most dangerous. Let me make something very clear, Benedict said, his voice soft but carrying absolute menace. I do not respond well to threats. If the Northern Alliance wishes to withdraw its support, that is its prerogative. But if you think to move against me, against my mate, against my heir, you will discover exactly why I have remained unchallenged for a decade. Your alliance is valuable, but not irreplaceable. Are we understood? Torsten visibly struggled with himself, pride warring with survival instinct. Finally, he bowed stiffly. Understood, Your Majesty. Good. Then you may take your leave. Give my regards to Lady Seraphine. I hope she finds a mate worthy of her. The delegation retreated, and Benedict could feel their barely suppressed rage. It would cause problems, he knew. The Northern Alliance might not move against him openly, but they would make their displeasure known in other ways. Trade agreements might sour. Support in council might waver. Subtle undermining rather than direct confrontation. But Benedict found he did not care. Not about politics or alliances or anything, except the white-haired Omega waiting for him in his chambers. He returned to find Aurora exactly where he had left her, curled on the sofa with a book. She looked up as he entered. and he saw the worry in her eyes. "Was it bad?" she asked. "Bad enough." Benedict crossed to her, pulling her into his arms and sinking onto the sofa. "The Northern Alliance is displeased. That is dangerous. I know." He pressed a kiss to her forehead. "But not as dangerous as living without you would be." Aurora's fingers traced patterns on his chest. "You keep saying things like that. Things that make it very difficult to be worried about anything." "Good. Let me do the worrying. That is what I am here for." She pulled back slightly, looking up at him with serious eyes. "Benedict, we are partners in this. You cannot shield me from every difficulty. I can try. You will fail. Then I will fail trying." His hand cupped her face. "Aurora, I lost everyone I ever loved. My mother, my sister, even my father, despite our complicated relationship. I will not lose you too. I cannot." The raw honesty in his voice made her chest ache. She pressed her hand over his heart, feeling it beat strong and steady beneath her palm. "You will not lose me. We will face everything together, remember? That is what being mates means." Benedict closed his eyes, breathing deeply, letting her calm wash over him. She was right, of course. They were stronger together than apart. But the instinct to protect, to shield, to defend, was hardwired into his very soul. "I will try," he said finally, "to share the burden, to let you stand beside me rather than behind me, but it will not be easy. Nothing worthwhile ever is." He captured her lips in a kiss that started gentle and quickly deepened into something more heated. Aurora responded eagerly, her fingers tangling in his long hair, her body pressing closer. Benedict groaned against her mouth, his hands spanning her waist, sliding up to cup her breasts through the thin fabric of her dress. "Benedict!" Aurora gasped as his mouth moved to her throat, finding the sensitive spot just below her ear. The servants could return at any moment. "Let them," he growled, nipping at her skin. "You are my betrothed. I am allowed to touch you." Allowed and advisable are two different things. He pulled back with visible effort, his chest heaving, his eyes glowing with barely restrained desire. "You are right. And you deserve better than a hurried coupling on a sofa. When I have you again, Aurora, it will be properly, in our bed, with all night stretching before us, and no interruptions." The promise in his voice made her shiver with anticipation. "Our wedding is in 3 days. 3 days too long." But he helped her straighten her dress, smoothing the wrinkles his hands had created. "Come, we should eat. And you need to meet some of the pack members who will be important to you." The next 3 days passed in a whirlwind of activity. Aurora met more people than she could possibly remember, each introduction a blur of names and faces and careful political maneuvering. Some welcomed her warmly, genuinely excited to meet their future queen. Others were more reserved, their expressions guarded, clearly reserving judgment. Through it all, Benedict remained at her side, a solid presence that never wavered. When someone was rude, his displeasure was immediate and chilling. When Aurora grew tired, he whisked her away without apology, prioritizing her needs over protocol. The seamstresses completed several dresses in record time, each more beautiful than the last. Aurora's favorite was a gown of midnight blue that made her white hair look luminous, with silver embroidery that caught the light when she moved. Benedict had taken one look at her wearing it and had to leave the room to compose himself. The wedding preparations moved forward with military precision. Benedict had not been joking about a small, private ceremony. Only a handful of trusted individuals were invited: the healer Meredith, Benedict's beta Marcus, and a few others who had proven their loyalty beyond question. The actual ceremony would take place in the palace's private chapel, an ancient room where Benedict's ancestors had pledged their vows for generations. Aurora had visited it the day before, feeling the weight of history in its stone walls, the echoes of past promises made and kept or broken. She stood there now, the morning of her wedding, wearing a simple white dress that would later be replaced by something more elaborate for the public appearances to come. Her white hair hung loose down her back, a crown of winter roses woven into the strands. Benedict waited for her at the altar, and when she began walking toward him, his expression transformed into something that stole her breath. Awe, desire, possession, and something deeper, more profound. Love, raw and unfiltered. When she reached him, he took her hands in his, and the world narrowed to just the two of them. The elder began the ancient words, the binding ritual that would join their lives and souls, but Aurora barely heard them. She was lost in Benedict's storm-gray eyes, in the promises she saw there, in the future they were about to build together. Do you, Aurora Everthorne, take this wolf as your mate, to bond with him, to run with him, to build a life and a pack with him, in all things until death parts you? I do, Aurora said, her voice steady and clear. And do you, Benedict Stormhowl, take this wolf as your mate, to bond with her, to protect her, to build a life and a pack with her, in all things until death parts you? I do. Benedict's voice was fierce, absolute. Then by the power vested in me by the ancient laws of our kind, I pronounce you mated and bound. What is joined here cannot be sundered. Benedict pulled Aurora to him, his kiss sealing their vows, claiming her as his in front of witnesses and the gods themselves. Aurora melted into him, pouring everything she felt into the kiss, her love, her trust, her hope for their future. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Benedict rested his forehead against hers. Mine, he whispered. Ours, Aurora corrected gently. We belong to each other now. Ours, he agreed, and kissed her again. The small gathering cheered, and Aurora found herself pulled into embraces, congratulations pouring over her. But through it all, Benedict never let her go far, his hand always finding hers, his presence a constant anchor. That night, as promised, Benedict carried her to their bed now, officially and irrevocably. He laid her down with infinite care, his hands trembling slightly as he began removing the layers of her wedding dress. I have dreamed of this, he confessed, his voice rough with emotion. Every night since I let you go, I dreamed of having you here, in my bed, as my mate. Aurora reached up, cupping his face, guiding him down for a kiss. Then dream no more. I am here. I am yours. Ours, he said, echoing her earlier words, and his smile was beautiful, transforming his usually stern features. They made love slowly, reverently, rediscovering each other with patient hands and hungry mouths. Benedict worshipped every inch of her body, pausing to press kisses to her still flat stomach where their child grew, murmuring promises to both mother and babe. When he finally entered her, they both gasped at the perfection of it, the way they fit together as if made for this, for each other. They moved together in a rhythm as ancient as the moon itself, building slowly toward a peak that left them both trembling and crying out. Afterward, Benedict held Aurora close, his hand protective over her stomach, his lips pressed to her temple. I love you, he said, the words coming easier now, practiced and true. I should have said it weeks ago in that clearing. I love you, Aurora, my mate, my queen, the mother of my children. I love you too, Aurora whispered, tears of joy sliding down her cheeks. I think I loved you from that very first moment, when you stepped out of the shadows and looked at me like I was the only thing in the world that mattered. You were. You are. You always will be. They drifted to sleep tangled together. Two souls that had found each other against all odds, bound now by love and law, and the tiny life growing between them. The months that followed were not without challenges. The Northern Alliance remained hostile, causing problems where they could, stirring up dissent. Some packs questioned Aurora's suitability, her strength, her ability to rule. But Aurora proved them all wrong. She met with pack leaders, listened to their concerns, addressed their needs with intelligence and compassion. She learned the intricacies of pack politics, of trade agreements and territorial disputes, and she did it while her body changed and grew with her pregnancy. Benedict remained true to his word, standing beside her through every difficulty. When she was too tired to stand, he carried her. When political adversaries tried to undermine her, his displeasure was swift and severe. When she doubted herself, he reminded her of her strength with words and touch and unwavering faith. As her pregnancy progressed, Benedict became almost comically overprotective. He ordered the healers to attend her weekly, insisted she eat constantly, and nearly had a breakdown when she wanted to take a walk outside the palace walls. "Benedict," Aurora said, exasperated as he hovered over her for the 5th time that hour, "I am pregnant, not made of glass. You are carrying my heir. Forgive me for being cautious. Cautious is one thing. This is obsessive. I love you obsessively. This should not come as a surprise." Despite her frustration, Aurora could not help but smile. His overprotectiveness came from a place of love, a fear of loss. She understood it, even as she pushed back against it. When her stomach began to swell noticeably, Benedict would spend hours with his hand pressed against it, feeling for movement, talking to the baby in a low, soothing voice that made Aurora's heart melt. "You are going to be such a good father," she told him one evening as they lay in bed, his hand as always on her belly. "I hope so." His expression was vulnerable. "I only know what not to do, based on my own father. I want to do better, be better." "You will be." Aurora covered his hand with hers. "Our children will be so loved, Benedict. They will never doubt that." When Aurora was 7 months pregnant, feeling large and ungainly despite Benedict's constant assurances that she was beautiful, news came that would test their bond in ways they had not anticipated. Lady Seraphine of the Northern Alliance had been found dead. The news struck like a thunderbolt. According to the reports, it appeared to be a suicide. A young woman driven to despair by the loss of her intended mate. But Benedict knew better. He recognized a political maneuver when he saw one. "They are trying to frame me," he said grimly, pacing the council chamber while his advisors watched nervously. "Or Aurora. Paint us as murderers, turn sentiment against us." "The Northern Alliance is already making that argument," Lord Corvin confirmed. "They claim Lady Seraphine was so distraught over your rejection that she took her own life. They are calling for justice." "Justice," Benedict spat. "They are calling for revenge." Aurora, present despite Benedict's protests, spoke up from where she sat. "Did you know her well? Lady Seraphine?" Benedict turned to her, his expression softening slightly. "Barely. We met a handful of times at formal events. She was pleasant enough. Ambitious, certainly. But she did not deserve this." "No, she did not." Aurora's hand rested on her swollen belly, feeling the baby kick. "So we find the truth. We investigate properly, and we clear our names. Or we go to war." Benedict's voice was flat. "Because that is what they want. An excuse to challenge me, to weaken the kingdom while we are vulnerable with the heir about to be born." The room fell silent at that grim assessment. Aurora stood with some difficulty, crossing to Benedict. She took his hand, placing it on her belly so he could feel their child moving. "Then we do not give them what they want. We stay calm, we investigate, and we prove our innocence." Benedict looked down at her, at the determined set of her jaw, the fierce intelligence in her frost-blue eyes. His Omega mate who had become a queen in truth, strong and wise, and exactly what he needed. "Very well. he said finally. "We investigate. But Aurora, if it comes to war, we will face it together." The investigation took weeks, with Benedict sending his best trackers and investigators to the Northern Alliance. What they uncovered was a web of deception and political maneuvering. Lady Seraphine had not taken her own life. She had been murdered by her own father, Lord Torsten, to create a martyr and an excuse for war. The evidence was damning. Witnesses who had seen Torsten entering his daughter's chambers the night she died, poison obtained through his contacts. Even a confession from a servant he had tried to silence. Torsten had sacrificed his own daughter for power, for revenge against Benedict, for the perceived slight of choosing Aurora over Seraphine. The revelation shocked the Northern Alliance. Many of Torsten's own pack turned against him, horrified by his actions. He was captured, tried, and executed for his crimes, and his pack fell into chaos without his leadership. Benedict might have pressed his advantage, might have absorbed the northern packs into his own territory. Instead, he helped them elect a new leader, a young she-wolf named Kira, who had been close to Seraphine and wanted nothing more than to end the cycle of violence and revenge. "You showed mercy," Aurora said, when it was all finally over, as they sat together in their chambers, her pregnancy now in its final weeks. "I am proud of you." "I showed wisdom," Benedict corrected. "Mercy is a luxury kings rarely afford. But wisdom, listening to my intelligent mate who pointed out that making enemies into allies is better than crushing them into dust. That is different." Aurora smiled, leaning into his warmth. Their child shifted and kicked, and they both laughed at the strength of it. "Soon," Aurora said, wonder in her voice. "Soon we will meet our baby." "And our life truly begins," Benedict agreed, kissing the top of her head. The baby came on a stormy night, thunder shaking the palace walls as Aurora labored. Benedict remained by her side through all of it, holding her hand, wiping her brow, whispering encouragements and promises and love. When their son finally entered the world, letting out a powerful cry that seemed to echo his father's strength, Benedict wept. He cut the cord with trembling hands, and when the healer placed the infant in Aurora's arms, he knelt beside the bed, his family before him, and felt complete for the first time in his life. "He is perfect," Aurora whispered, exhausted but glowing with joy. "Look at him, Benedict. He is perfect." Benedict looked at his son, tiny but strong, with a shock of black hair and lungs that suggested he would grow into a formidable wolf. "He is ours," Benedict said, his voice thick with emotion. "Our miracle." They named him Asher, meaning blessed, because that is what he was. A blessing neither of them had expected, the product of one night beneath a full moon that had changed everything. As Benedict held his maiden son, watching Aurora drift into exhausted sleep with Asher cradled against her chest, he thought back to that night in the clearing. How lost he had been then. How certain that duty and law mattered more than the pull of his heart. How wrong he had been. Aurora had not just given him a child. She had given him a future, a reason to be more than just a feared king. She had taught him that strength came not from standing alone, but from allowing yourself to be vulnerable, to love, to trust. The great Alpha King, who had never been defeated in battle, had been conquered completely by a white-haired Omega in a red dress. And he could not imagine a sweeter surrender. In the years that followed, Benedict and Aurora would have 3 more children, 2 daughters and another son. Their family grew, and with it, the kingdom prospered. Aurora became known as the Queen of the People, beloved for her compassion and wisdom, while Benedict remained the fierce protector, the wall against which all threats broke. But in their private moments, in the chambers where only family was allowed, Benedict remained what he had always been with Aurora: gentle, devoted, protective. He still carried her when she was tired, still hovered during each pregnancy, still looked at her as if she were the miracle that had saved his life. Because she was. On their 10th anniversary, as they stood on the balcony watching their children play in the gardens below. Benedict pulled Aurora close, pressing a kiss to her temple. "Do you remember that night?" he asked. "In the clearing, under the full moon?" "Every detail," Aurora replied, leaning into him. "The way you stepped out of the shadows. The way you looked at me as if you could see into my soul." "I could." His arms tightened around her. "I saw my future in your eyes. I was just too foolish to recognize it immediately. But you figured it out eventually. Because you fainted at the ceremony of choosing, carrying my heir, and shattered all my carefully laid plans." His tone was affectionate, teasing. "Best thing that ever happened to me." Aurora turned in his arms, rising on her toes to kiss him. Even after a decade, after 4 children and countless challenges, the spark between them had never dimmed. "I love you," she said, the words as true now as they had been the first time she spoke them. "My fierce king, my gentle love." "And I love you," Benedict replied, his storm-gray eyes soft with emotion. "My dawn, my salvation, my everything." Below them, their children laughed, the sound carrying on the wind. The palace that had once been cold and silent now rang with life and love. The kingdom that had been held together by fear and strength was now bound by something more enduring: hope. And it all began with one white-haired Omega in a red dress, who had unknowingly carried the Alpha King's heir in her womb, who had fainted while mates were chosen, and who had changed the fate of them all. In the end, it was not destiny that had brought them together. It was choice. Aurora had chosen to stay in that clearing instead of fleeing. Benedict had chosen love over duty when he ran to catch her as she fell, and every day since, they had chosen each other, through challenges and triumphs, through fear and joy. That choice, renewed every morning and honored every night, was the strongest bond of all. Stronger than fate, stronger than magic, stronger than any force in the world. It was love, pure and enduring, and it had given them everything. As the sun set over the kingdom, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, Benedict and Aurora stood together, watching their children, their future, their legacy. And they knew, with absolute certainty, that they had found what so few ever discovered, a love that would last beyond their lifetimes, written in the stars and sealed by the moon that had witnessed their first joining. Their story had begun with a fall, but it had become a flight, soaring higher than either had dreamed possible, carried on wings of hope, and bound by a love that would never, ever break. We'd love to hear your thoughts on this beautiful love story. Let us know what you thought of this tale full of emotions and surprises. Tell us your name, where you're watching from, and rate this story from 0 to 10 if it touched your heart. And if you enjoyed the plot, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the amazing new stories coming soon. See you next time.